Hi, I'm Declan, and this is Sarah. We're from Hector's House, which is a suicide prevention and mental health advocacy charity. And today we're going to be talking about what to do if you are concerned about somebody you know and then potentially considering suicide. We're going to go through a relatively brief approach on how you would talk to them about that and hopefully be able to give them the tools they need to keep themselves safe. So, Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Declan. So just to give a quick background on Hector's House as a charity in general before we get started. The reason we're here is because Hector Stringer sadly took his own life when he was 18. He was a normal chap. He had many friends. He was very, very sociable. Every time I mention I work for Hector's House, someone tells me that they knew Hector or loved him dearly. So it did come as a huge shock to his friends and family when it happened.
I am one of those people as well. So I did know him, and it was, definitely a big shock. It was not something anyone saw coming. So yeah,
absolutely, yeah, and that's echoed throughout everyone who I speak to who knew him. There was signs that, with hindsight bias, were there. He did overthink things slightly. He did self-harm. However, it did come out of the blue to his friends and family, and they spent a lot of time wondering what they could have done to prevent it. Hence why the charity Hector's House was started up to help not only to educate people on suicidality and mental health, but also to provide support to those who had been affected or are being affected by mental health and suicide in the area. Which kind of leads me on to what we do at Hector's House in general, just before we get started on the slides that we have. So main three aims are we do education, awareness and support. So we visit schools and organisations to talk about mental health, and we provide suicide alertness training. We raise vital awareness about mental health and suicide stigma, both in our community and online through our social media presence and our website. We also then, kind of the main bulk of our job is we do tailored signposting and give support to every single person who reaches out to us. We don't have an age range or a gender in particular. If you're struggling, reach out, and that's what we do at Hector's House, basically.
Yep.
So what we're going to talk about today is how to support a loved one who is experiencing thoughts of suicide. It's incredibly scary, and especially if there's been an attempt, and we want to hopefully give some people some tools, even if nothing registers today, if all you know is that you need to reach out to someone for further support, that you can't do this alone and that you don't have to do this alone, we'll be happy. But what we're going to try and help you understand today is how to work out what they're going through, how to empathize with them, how to listen, and then the kind of crisis planning around keeping them safe, finding support for them and yourself, and then probably most importantly is how to keep yourself well while you're doing all of this, because it is incredibly draining. And as we always say, you can't pour from an empty cup. That's like our famous phrase here at Hector's House, that you absolutely need to keep yourself well before you help someone else. So that's kind of roughly what we're going to be going through today. So spotting the signs, we discussed how to put this in because the signs vary for each individual person.
Yeah, so these would be the most stereotypical, I guess, would be probably the best way to phrase it. Not necessarily the most common, but these are the things that people tend to associate with someone going through a sort of mental health crisis.
And like you say, it can vary from everyone, because maybe the person that you're supporting always has trouble sleeping. So therefore a sleep disturbance isn't actually something that's a red flag for you.
Also, it can also be kind of backwards. It might be that someone who ordinarily has a lot of trouble sleeping, now they're sleeping all day, every day.
Totally. So that's a huge
disturbance to that person's usual behavior, even if their behavior is usually unusual.
Completely that. Yeah, exactly. So we try to remember through signs, as you can see. So sleep disturbance, and exactly what you say. Are they sleeping not at all? Are they sleeping too much? What is their usual sleeping pattern? And has it had a huge difference there? Just keeping an eye on that. Isolation. This is a big one. I think we all not all, but most of us tend to isolate when we're going through a tough time. We don't like to burden other people with our problems because we know that other people are going through a tough time. But definitely keep an eye out for a friend that's quiet or a family member that's taken themselves outside of, their usual social circles. A really big one is giving away possessions, especially ones that they are quite proud of. So if someone had a car that they love, are they suddenly going, oh, I'm giving it to my daughter or my friend? That would be a big kind of, thing for us to keep an eye out on.
Yeah, things of sentimental value, like jewelry or instruments or bits
Totally.
of artwork, and things like that are real. Those aren't ordinary things to give away. So yeah, that's
Exactly that.
a sign that something's happening.
Yeah, or even money. If someone is suddenly being incredibly generous with their money, then that's when to go, oh, is everything okay here? No interest in anything. So I've used a guitar because Declan plays guitar. But were they really into music, or did they love painting and all of a sudden they are just making no time for it, and not making time for it, but just have no interest in it whatsoever? This is something that will go for most people anyway if they're going through a tough few days or weeks. Again, it's one of those signs that we can notice out on. And then another really big,
I think as well, just on that one, a lot of the time it's painted as being kind of creative or physical outlets that people will lose interest in. So yeah, things like playing music or doing a sport or or that kind of thing. Also, what that person's interests are. For a lot of people, it could be things like video games or a particular franchise of a TV series or something like that. Ordinarily they're very interested in. Could be there's a film coming out that all of a sudden they're not interested in that normally they would be. It's just, again, use your judgment. This person, think about the things you'd expect them to be interested in or they've had an interest in previously, and just look for those kind of things changing.
Absolutely, that's a really key one. And another one to be aware of was that person really into their appearance? Did they like wearing makeup? Did they like having a particular hairstyle that they would regularly go to the barbers to get? All of a sudden they don't care about it anymore. Maybe their hygiene was always top notch, and now they can't manage to brush their teeth in the morning. That kind of thing as well. Any kind of changes in patterns like that is really key to be aware of. And then the last one would be, speaking of no future. That's a pretty key one. If you're trying to make plans with them and they're being a bit kind of vague on if they're going to be here or not, if they say things like, well, soon everything will be sorted out, or if they don't see them getting past a certain date, that is again a really big indicator that something's not right.
I think as well with that one, it's important. You can be talking to someone who they're going through a hard time. Maybe they're being made redundant, or they're going through a breakup or something, and so they might be saying like, oh, I'm just I'm really struggling to figure out how I'm going to deal with this problem. But that's very different to going like, oh, I just don't care about that problem anymore, or it doesn't matter. That's when it's an issue. If someone's saying like, oh, I'm struggling to figure it out, that's a pretty good indication they're still actively trying to problem solve it. Whereas if they're kind of giving up on fixing those problems, that's more of an indicator that there's something else going on.
Completely. And then we just put there, any changes, like, trust your own intuition. When you are the expert in this person, you will know what their behaviors were and what they are now. So being, obviously not trying to overanalyze everyone, but just being aware that if you see one or two of these things and then you also notice something about them that's changed, be it that they used to come down to the pub every Friday and now they've stopped coming, or you're seeing that they're giving away all of their favorite trainers or something like that. Those kind of things are big indicators.
There's another one as well, which we hadn't written down, but it's a big one, is usually someone else will kind of bring it up as well. That's a really common thing. Is someone will be like, oh, have you talked to such and such recently? Because I've noticed this, or I've noticed that, or someone else told me, like, have you spoke to this person? Because someone else told me they gave them, their car or whatever it is. A lot of the time it's kind of the rumor mill gets there first. And it's kind of talked about in like, hushed tongues in the background, because no one wants to be the person to make the move to ask someone what's going on. But usually you'll a lot of the time there'll be that kind of buzz generates itself underneath it all.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And, it's terrifying when that conversation comes up and it's not a conversation we want to have, but it can be life-saving. So, someone telling you that their friend doesn't seem like themselves, or have you noticed this about someone else, you going, well, then I'm going to reach out. That could save that person's life. So it's really important. It can definitely get to you before you've noticed the signs yourself. So being aware of those kind of conversations is really important. And then we're just going to try to understand what might be going on for the person who's having thoughts of suicide, just so we can understand better that it's not often that they want to die. It's more that life is just too painful to live in right now. So it's about understanding what might be going on for them that's leading them to feel this way. It's also a good thing to go, if you have a friend that you're thinking, oh, they're not going out as much or whatever, and then you think actually they've just been through X, Y, and Z, that can also be another kind of indicator that they might be having thoughts of suicide. So we've broken it into 3 sections. Hopefully it's coherent. So we have an emotional bucket. It's like our overwhelm bucket, but it's like kind of like your day-to-day stuff. So it'll be, having a row with mum or dad. It could be the amount of school. I'm using a child in this example, or a young person. It could be either your workload at work or at school is really overwhelming. It could be that your sleep pattern's broken up. It could be that your room's a mess and that's really stressing you out. Or it could be that social media, the news is just, it's all you can think about at the moment. So that's our emotional bucket that can get full. And then when we get overwhelmed is when that bucket overfills.
I think especially because most of those things aren't directly your responsibility. So,
Totally.
If it's family conflict, unless you're going out of your way to cause it, you're kind of stuck inside that environment against your will. Same with like if you live in a place that's very cluttered, unless it is specifically your clutter, there's kind of not much you can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like these things confuse, and like the news, obviously the news is the news. All you can do,
Yeah.
You're being overwhelmed by it, is try not to look at it, but it's still there. So it's just trying to work out how you would distance yourself from these things. And for some people, that's the problem, is they're allowing these things to fill that bucket.
Completely. And, there's ways of draining the buckets. This is where like the self-compassion exercises come into play. So if you can, obviously we would prefer for you to make sure you prioritize sleep. But if that's not an issue, it's like, well, how much rest can I get during the day? How can I drill a hole in the bucket to stop the overwhelm happening, that I can drain some of this stress out? So be it like go for walks, make sure you're getting rest during the day, maybe switching off the news once in a while. That kind of thing will help to drain it so we don't get to the stage of overwhelm. But obviously we're very aware that that's not always in our control. But what we do to prevent the bucket overflowing is in our control, and that's really important.
Yeah.
So another sign to be aware of is any history or a diagnosis of a mental health issue. So it could be that they've had depression in the past, maybe they're struggling with anxiety, or it could be that they have a neurodiversity of some sort, be it OCD, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, PTSD as well. And or maybe they have a personality disorder that they've recently been diagnosed with, that they're struggling to come to terms with. And as much as you can, learning about these conditions or issues or whatever you would like to call them is really important here, because it can help us understand how they might be thinking. There's some really great websites out there like Mind and the NHS website, which will have a huge amount of information. So for example, if you know that your friend has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, there's a whole page on there that will go through the symptoms, what to look out for, how to self-care with that condition or issue. And you learning about it will help you to help them, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, massively.
And then the last one is stacking. Now, this is things that have kind of happened to us, or like external life events that we can't control, and in some way will always be a part of the build-up of you, if you see what I mean. So this could be like a bereavement. Maybe that person's mum's recently passed away. Maybe they've relocated and they're finding the move really stressful. Maybe that they're living in poverty, or have had a big financial stress. Maybe they've lost their job, for example. You could know that they've been through trauma in the past, or maybe their relationship's just broken down. Those kind of things, they stack up and can lead us to feeling hopeless. So being aware of any of those things are really important when you're trying to help somebody. It's not something we can take away, which is a very difficult thing to come to terms with. But what we can do is understand how that event might be affecting the person that we're caring for here, and ensuring that they know that they can talk about it with us. They can not talk about it with us if that's what they need, but just so that they know that we're aware and that we care, basically.
Absolutely.
And then it'd be really good to understand how they're thinking and how they're feeling at the moment. So it's not, as I said before, it's not that they want to die. It's just that life is so overwhelming at the moment that they can't see a way to live, or living feels so unbearable that this is their only, sometimes they see as their only option for things to get better. We kind of often say that suicide is a very permanent solution to a very temporary problem. So understanding that the way they're thinking is, this is the only way to stop me being in pain, or I'm a burden and actually life would be so much easier if I wasn't here for my parents or my friends. They might be feeling that they're not good enough. Maybe they feel like there's no point in living. Maybe they've got nothing to live for as they see it. Maybe they just can't see another way out. Or maybe they just don't think that things are going to get better for them.
I think as well, just specifically on that, that's the hardest thing to understand, is that when someone's in that mindset, they genuinely think that for them to end their own life is better for everyone. It's because there's that misconception that it's a selfish thing that drives people to sort of thoughts of suicide, but it's not. It's they're so muddled up in their thought process by that point, they really think they're going to be doing people a favor. And that's the thing that's very difficult to understand if you're talking to someone who is suicidal, is that they really think that they're going to be making things better for everyone by not being there. It's not the case, but it's so hard to understand that that's how someone thinks. They're not concerned about anyone being upset when they're gone. That's not part of their thought process.
Entirely that. And this is where it's so important that the more people who are aware of how they're thinking, we can then reassure them, like, you're not a burden at all. Like, if anything, like, I want you to tell me these things. I want to help. I want you well.
Yeah.
And also to know that I think sometimes when we're in those depths, we're seeing, maybe we're seeing our parents struggle with their jobs, or our younger siblings. Maybe we're seeing our friends going through a breakup, and we're like, oh, I can't give this to anybody. It's too massive and they're already going through so much. And that's fair enough. We can't all be empty vessels all the time for these problems. But the most important thing to know is that you've got services out there that purely exist to have space for you.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can come to us, you can come to Hector's House, Samaritans, Shout, Papyrus. There's like literally a list of them that we have on our website. They're there for you in that moment that you feel like, I've got nobody to turn to.
And it's also very important to remember, and I think this is something that I know in particular guys tend to struggle with, which is that this idea that, well, I won't go to that place or to those people because there's someone out there with bigger problems, and I'm going to be occupying a space that could go to someone who needs it more. But that's not the case. If you're having these thoughts, even if they're relatively intermittent, and you're really beginning to dwell on them, you're as worthy of the help as anyone else. You don't have to be at the absolute crisis point by the time you get help. You can be much earlier down that road, and in fact, it's better the sooner you can accept that, and the sooner you can go and find the help, the easier it's going to be for you and for the people who are trying to help you.
100%.
So a really big thing is, you haven't got to wait until things are absolutely at their worst or at the 11th hour. You can reach out for help as soon as you recognize that things aren't good.
Exactly that. And I think, there's always someone who's got it worse than us, and I think sometimes people feel like, well, I've got nothing to complain about.
Yeah.
I've got, my life's looking pretty good actually, but why am I having these thoughts? That doesn't mean that you're not worthy of support.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there is always, you can think of any situation, there's always going to be someone who's got it worse than you, but that does not take away from your worthiness of care at all.
My friend always says the worst thing that ever happens to you is the worst thing that ever happens to you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is. It's like on the scale of 1 to 10 for you and in your life, a 10 is a 10. It doesn't matter what the actual cause or what the event is. So yeah,
it's so true. Understanding what that person is thinking and how they're feeling is really important, because then it can help us to understand that they're not being selfish by thinking this way, or being attention seeking, whatever the other kind of stigma is around suicide. This is not that. This is really serious, and it's them almost being so selfless that they want to keep the problem hidden.
Yep.
And we just need to make sure that they know that it's okay to open up about it, and ensuring that the people who are watching this video know if they do open up about it, it's going to be okay. I know it sounds really scary, but it's going to be all right. And Hector's House and Samaritans and everyone like that are here for you when that eventuality happens. We're not expecting you to now keep this person alive. So empathize. We're going to let them know that we're here for them. We're going to let them know that they're not alone in this. So we're going to go through some do's and don'ts. We're not expecting everyone to be flawless in this. It's just some pointers to be aware of when we're going through it. But yeah, if you mess up, we mess up all the time and say the wrong thing, and that's okay. You're human at the end of the day. You're not a robot, and that's what we actually need. So we'll go through the do's first. It is safe to ask them if they're having thoughts of suicide. I think there's like a big misconception that if you ask the question, are you having thoughts of suicide, you're like planting the idea in their head. That's not the case. They're already having those thoughts.
I think this is by far the biggest misconception with everything there is to do with suicide and suicidality. I think this is by far the biggest one, is the thought of, I don't want to ask in case I give them an idea, but
completely that.
Yeah, this is by far the most important thing, is like, if you are worried about them, you have to ask, and don't sugarcoat it. Ask them outright if that's something they're thinking about.
Completely. And it is scary because we don't always want to hear the answer.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a yes, I am having thoughts of suicide. That's really scary.
Yeah.
So there's a double edge to it. I think number one, we don't want to plant the ideas, but number two, we're kind of scared to ask the question a lot of the time.
Especially if it's someone you look up to. You know, if it's like, you know, if this is a parent who you've always looked at as being sort of, you know, somewhat bulletproof, or a friend of yours who helps guide you through stuff, or you've looked to them for an example of how to kind of live and how to do things, it's very difficult to ask them to expose that part of themselves.
No, 100%. It's a very vulnerable question to ask.
Yeah.
Massively so. It's the most important, because it kind of shows them that you're able to handle what they're holding on to inside. Like, if you ask questions like, you're not thinking of doing anything silly, are you? Or you're not going to hurt yourself, they could answer no, because to them suicide isn't silly. It's it's the most smartest idea they've ever had in that moment.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to harm myself. Well, that's it's a bit kind of wishy-washy, if you see what I mean. Yeah. Asking the question directly and going, are you having thoughts of suicide? That even just saying the word suicide it's going to be like a flood of relief for that person to hear that actually someone gets it.
Yep.
And it might be the first time that question's ever been asked to them, and it's the first time they actually feel safe enough to answer honestly. It's
very hard to dodge such a direct question.
Totally. It's impossible. The more direct, the better.
Yep.
So completely. So yeah, it's totally safe. We ask it. Almost every support call we get, we ask the question. Sometimes it's a yes, sometimes it's a no. But once you've asked that question, even if it's a no, they open up so much more, because they go, oh, this person's safe. So don't be afraid. I know it's scary. And I actually practiced in the mirror a few times when I first started at Hector's House, asking the question, because saying it out loud is actually quite terrifying. But the more you get used to it, the better. And it is completely safe to ask. Try your best to stay calm, especially if they say yes. It's really difficult to say, but just show that you can handle anything. Even if underneath, I always say, like, underneath sometimes you're panicking, show them that you're all right. It's a bit like the swan gliding across the water and their legs are just doing this. You want to make sure that they don't then panic that they've caused you distress. So just stay calm, take deep breaths, focus on your breathing is always really important. And listen. You don't actually have to say much, which is great, I think, in this kind of conversation. Let them speak and just focus on your breathing and listening. But try and be a container for whatever stress they've got. So you're not filling it with your own stuff. You're letting it be totally empty so they can fill it with theirs.
Yeah. And I think bear in mind that the reasons could be anything. And so there might be a lot more to it than you're expecting. So it could be not only are you about to find out that this person who you see in a certain light is having thoughts of suicide, which is quite a shock to deal with anyway, but there's no telling what has led them there. So you could be about to really see this person in a whole new light, and it's about not letting that get to you. It's just you're there for them in this moment. It's not about your image or your conception of someone.
Totally. We kind of have to leave our self at the door in situations like this as much as we can. Pick it up when you leave the room.
Yeah.
And we'll focus on that in a bit. It's not that we're saying to be totally selfless and anything like that. Like, we'll come to your own self-care and how important that is after we've had these conversations, but during the conversation we're focusing on them. Totally.
Yeah. It's the sort of listening without judgment part of it. It's a difficult thing to do, but it's very
completely
important at this moment.
It is it's so important. And then we're going to instill hope, because there is always hope. I can't tell you how many times we've had a phone call and they're like, I dare you to find some hope, because I've just got nothing. And the fact that they're on the phone call or they've sent that first email, that is hope. The fact that this person is sitting in front of you telling you this, that is hope. There is always hope for a better future. There's always hope that things are going to get better, or even hope that they will get stronger in dealing with the things that they're going through. Like, again, like we say, we can't take away horrendous life events. I wish we could. But what we can do is help that person to get the tools to deal with those life events. But they can't do that alone. And that's the thing, to be really adamant with them, that they can't, nobody's expecting them to do this alone. They've got you, but more importantly, they're going to have some actual support from professionals. And you can ask them to tell them more about what has led them to having these thoughts of suicide. They might not want to say anything at that point. Maybe they're really emotional and they can't get their words out. Just sit with them. Silence is key. I swear, silence is the best thing ever. Don't be afraid of silence. It allows them to get their thoughts in gear. It allows them to process what's just been going on. You don't have to fill it. I know I'm woeful at this. This is like the one thing I really struggle with, because I hate silence. But it's like, it's the part where the really big stuff happens.
I can't remember if this is something we pick up again later on or not, but this is, I know, something we talked about before in terms of that that thing of giving someone time as well. Is you really have to understand that if this is the first time they've talked about these things, it's not, maybe not so much they're uncomfortable talking about them, it's that they're having to put words together in an order they haven't done before.
Yeah, completely.
To organize all these thoughts and articulate them, and that's something they weren't prepared for, and they might just need a bit of time to actually work out exactly what it is, because there also could be that, oh, actually, yeah, I am having thoughts of suicide, but it's only just started, and then they might be like, actually, no, it goes back.
Yeah, and they're thinking it all through.
Or actually, no, it goes back to that thing, and it's, they're sort of problem solving it in real time as well. So you have to give them time and not try and lead them to the answers that you think they might be. Again, it's the no judgment thing. Like, you might know things about their history and you're going to project those things back onto them, but you have to just let them have the time they need.
Absolutely. I think something else that's really important is, you can use gentle encouragers. So they might be sitting in silence and maybe they apologize, like, sorry, I'm just not sure. You can say things like, take your time, I'm here, no rush. Just let them know that you're not just sitting in silence and feeling really awkward yourself. You're sitting in silence waiting for them, and that's okay. And if it gets to like, an obscene amount of silence time, go, this is obviously really important. Let's get some help in. So that's kind of our next point, is we're getting further help immediately. So if they've disclosed thoughts of suicide, if they've talked loads about what's going on, or they said nothing at all about what's going on, the most important part is that we get them further help, because we're not expecting you to keep this person alive. We're not expecting you to be their safe person or to be an expert in any way. There'll always be that next step up for someone who can do a proper suicide intervention and get them the care that they need. So we'll go through the don'ts. Now, again, I don't want you feeling like this is terrifying and I'm going to mess up. We all mess up. You're human. This is, number one, it's the first time you're probably ever doing it. And number two, it's a very high stressful situation. We're not expecting perfection here at all. Just some pointers to be aware of when you are having the conversation, about someone who's having thoughts of suicide. Try not to downplay what they're going through. This is really important because for them, it's everything. It's massive. It's huge. So if, for example, they tell you, I've just lost my job and my girlfriend has left me, try not to say, well, it's okay, she'll get another job and you didn't really like her very much anyway. Like, no, right now to them, this is huge. This is everything. So you can say things like, what a terrible situation to be going through. I can totally understand why this feels massive and like it's not going to get better. That's okay to say. That's just you showing that you're understanding what they're going through. But try not to downplay it. Whatever problems they have, try not to downplay it. I'm sure 99.9% of people won't do the next one, but I always have to just make sure. Try not to criticize them or blame them for what's happened. Even if my girlfriend's left me and you go, well, you did, do something terrible. They already know that. We're not here to, or, if they say, I lost my job and you say, well, you were late 4 days in a row. That's not what they need to hear right now. I know you.
It's also because that can be, again, going back to if you view someone in a certain light, if it's someone you really look up to in whatever context that is, this can sort of feel like a betrayal to you, because you're like, how can you feel that way? Because I think of you in like such a high regard. Totally. How can you possibly, like, this doesn't make any sense. And
yeah,
again,
totally.
Well, it's because it's not about you, it's about them. So
that's really true. I think we try to almost, it's almost like denial stage, isn't it? Where we're like, no, everything's fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
And it's because we want to believe it, not because it's what we're seeing in them. That's Absolutely. A very good point. The third one on here is something I actually really struggle with, which is don't give them advice. It's not what they need right now in this moment. We're not focusing on getting their life better. We're just focusing on keeping them alive. So if someone says to you, I'm having thoughts of suicide because I've lost my job and my girlfriend's left me, I'm using this as an example now. Don't say, well, let's get you on Indeed. Have you tried a dating app? Have you tried getting her back? Have you tried asking for a refer? That's not what they need right now. They've already had all these things in their head. And it's going to feel like you're not really listening to what they're actually experiencing. You're trying to problem solve for them. They're not asking for that. It's great when they do come to you for it. And, it's good to have those things in your back pocket. But right now we're focusing on keeping them alive and keeping them safe. So try not to give advice in this moment. And that's something I struggle with massively, because I think as a society, we're like natural problem solvers most of the time. But just try and listen. And, you can say, when you're feeling ready, I can help with X, Y, and Z. But at the moment, we're just going to be here and keeping you alive. And they actually might ask you, can you help me get her back? Can you help me get a new job? You can say, absolutely. But for now, let's focus on keeping you safe.
Yep. And
just keep bringing it back to that being your only goal here is safety. Another thing that we are trying to avoid here is comparing to our own experience or someone else's experience that you might know. So going, oh, well, I lost my job 3 years ago and I was fine. It's very different for them. It's not the same situation. And actually, you giving an example of someone else's experience and how they handled it brilliantly or how everything worked out, again, it kind of diminishes what they're experiencing right now and what they're going through. So just be very mindful of using language of comparison. We're solely focusing on them. We're not focusing on anybody else. Yeah, and again, another one that's very similar is like, don't tell them how they feel, because we don't know how anyone feels. Even if their dad recently died and your dad recently died, you can't say I know how you feel, because you don't know what their relationship was with him. It's very different, and again, it kind of diminishes what they're going through and how unique their experience is. It can be comforting at times, but in this situation, we're going to try and avoid that. Again, like I said, don't worry if you slip up. It's not the end of the world. It's not that you're going to be responsible for anything that happens. It's just trying to be as empathetic as possible in this situation. Don't guilt them into staying alive. It's a really hard one, because we want to show them how important they are to us. So we might say things like, imagine how upset your mum would be, or imagine, how your friends would feel. What about your dog? Who's going to look after your dog? Let's not do that. They're already feeling pretty low. What we want to do is remind them how loved they are. Yes, you're so surrounded by love. You've got your mum, you've got your friends, you've got your dog. but don't use it as a guilt trip into staying alive. What we want to do is make them want to stay alive for them, not for other people. And don't change the subject. I think that's a pretty obvious one. Don't go, oh, isn't it a lovely day outside? Let's just try and stay focused. As uncomfortable as it is, I know it's awful, but stay focused on them, stay focused on the topic. We want to make sure that they know that we are able to have this conversation as best as we can. So yeah, that's a very rough summary on empathy and how to have that empathetic conversation. So yeah, just kind of how to listen. We're going to be present. We're not going to use our phones. We're going to be reassuring. So reminding that things are going to be okay. And that's not a lie. Things are going to be okay with the right help. We're going to be patient, which is very difficult. So again, leaving space for that silence. If they are needing to get outside and go for a walk, we're going to go outside and go for a walk with them. We're going to be very calm, hopefully, as much as we can be in the situation. We're going to be kind, as we just kind of discussed about before. We're going to allow for silence by being silent ourselves. And we're going to be prepared, and that's the next step. We're not going to walk into, obviously, I think, Declan, we said before about be prepared as much as we can be, right?
So that's a big thing is, and with that being prepared, I think a big part of that is don't be afraid to step in. Because things can be very not easy, but you can have a big conversation with someone and then assume that now that conversation has been had, that other person will kind of take the reins on what comes next.
Yeah.
Or that maybe that's going to have worked as sort of almost like a puncture repair kit. That's going to keep them going for a bit. And then you'll deal with the next thing when you get to the next thing. You know, if you need to put things in place to keep them safe, just get started on it and just tell them that this, you know, we're gonna, even if it's just a case of going, we need to do something, I don't know what to do. You can Google it while they're sat there. You can look up places like us, like Samaritans, like Shout, like, you know, NHS directories, and you can get those things, get that ball in motion to be like, this is how we're going to find the tools that we need to keep you safe. And don't leave it kind of just in the ether, you know?
Absolutely. And again, it's hopefully reassuring for the person watching this video, supporting someone with thoughts of suicide, that we're not expecting you to do the work.
Yeah.
Not expecting you to keep this person alive solely on, this is not on your shoulders solely.
No.
This is why organizations like Hector's House and Samaritans and Papyrus exist. It's to help people like you and to help people like the person you're supporting. So you're not alone. That's, I hope that brings comfort to someone to know that at no point will we expect you to do this by yourself.
Yeah, we're kind of giving you the tools to be a bridge between this person and the support that they need.
Completely that. Really recommend downloading this app, Stay Alive by Grassroots Suicide Prevention, who are a charity. It is a safety plan, which is something that if you were to call Hector's House or Samaritans or Papyrus, they would go through what's called a safety plan, which is a document that a person with thoughts of suicide can have with them at all times to, when they're having that moment of overwhelm, to help kind of descale it down, to know where to go to for support, who to call, what activity to do. So this is actually an app that asks all those questions. So you can see if I'm not feeling safe from suicide, I'll talk to and name that person. I know it says a friend on there, but name the friend. So what you can do is go through that together, or you can call ourselves at Hector's House or someone at Samaritans and they can go through it for you if you're not feeling up to it, which is totally fine. But it'd be a really good app for the person with thoughts of suicide to have. I'd actually recommend literally every person doing this app and having it on their phone, because we all have moments of overwhelm. And I'm not saying we all have thoughts of suicide, but it's certainly a really good tool to know that actually if I'm feeling really overwhelmed, I always forget that I really like Sudoku, and that really calms me down. So it's a really great tool to have, especially for people with thoughts of suicide. It's free on every app store. So just reminding you that if you've had a conversation with someone, if someone's come back from a hospital after an attempt to suicide, if your loved one has just blurted it out to you, if you found them trying to attempt, whatever that horrendous situation might be, please know that you're not alone, and that you can get in touch with people who are there and who are trained to keep people alive. You can text Hector to 85258. That's a really good one to actually give the person with thoughts of suicide as well. It's open 24/7 and they can text. So if they're in a situation where they don't feel like they can talk, if they're in a family home or at work, they can text and get support. Calling Samaritans on 116123. Again, they're trained. We all know them. We love them. They're a really great support, and also for you too, as the person who is caring for them. And then us at Hector's House, myself, Declan, Rob, Karen, and Imo, the team are here for you. And we are not open 24/7. We are only open 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. However, we're very firm on the fact that we will be back in touch within 24 hours. So it might not be the right one for an emergency. However, you call Samaritans, you text Hector. In that instant, you get in touch with us and we'll be in touch the next day to talk with you. So although we're not crisis care, we're certainly there for you in the day after that you've had the conversation and you're feeling a bit wobbly, which is totally understandable. Or if you think that person might need further support and you don't know where to turn to, the GP, counselling, whatever it might be, if you need that bit of guidance, that's what Hector's House is here for. So it's places like Hector's House for your kind of overall care, and Samaritans, Shag, Papyrus for your emergency helplines.
I think in this particular context, where we'd be particularly useful is either if you are gearing up to have this conversation with someone, to get in touch with us and say, like, worried about whoever it is and how to bring that up, and we can help provide you with not just like how to do it, but also we can give you some extra resources to have at your disposal, whether it's just other numbers or websites or whatever it is, or things that are more local to you, because each kind of area has its own infrastructure when it comes to mental health support. But we can get that information to you so you can go in kind of pre-armed. And also the inverse of that. So if you found yourself having a conversation like this with someone, you might want to talk to us and be like, I don't know how well I handled it because I didn't know what to say when they said this, so I said that, and we can kind of help talk you through it. Or it might be that you've had that conversation with someone and now maybe it's brought up some things within yourself you're struggling with. Again, we're there for all of that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. It's so important. And yeah, I think knowing that we'll be there regardless as well. So if you get GP support, we'll be there in the background cheering you on.
And don't ever feel like it would be a waste of our time. Don't ever feel like you've got bigger things to worry about or whatever it is. Like I had this conversation with somebody I know recently where I was like, this is what we do. This is the whole premise of it. This is what we are for. Like, it's for people who are in the position you are in. So for you to come to us, that's the whole reason this exists. So you're not wasting our time. You're not burdening us with something where you think would be better used elsewhere, or because someone's got worse problems. That doesn't factor into it. We're here to help people, and you're a person, and if you need help, that's what we do. So
completely that. And we're not experts in one thing in particular, so we will probably signpost you on to someone who is, for example, if the person that you're supporting is self-harming or has an eating disorder, that's not what we specialize in. So we will probably signpost you on, but what we will do is stay with you while that process is happening. So you can always get in touch, email us, call us and go, how is that? So that service is for everyone. That is services for literally everyone. So we will never turn you away because your problems aren't big enough. Like I said, we'll only signpost you when it's outside of our remit, but we're still there. We're still with you as long as you need. So it's really important that never feel like your problem's too small, because it's not. It's a really important message. The Hector's House team are here to help. We can do things like helping go through a safety plan. We can give advice on staying well for you and the person you're supporting. Anything else you might need support with, we will help with in the remit of mental health and staying safe from suicide. But predominantly, we will always ask you to text Hector to 85258 when we're not around, because we're not a crisis line. If you fear there is an immediate risk to life, call 999, because this is an emergency. And if you can, remove all means of harm. ask for help. This could be from the pros. You can call Samaritans, or you can call a friend just to be there with you. Someone that you trust, obviously. If it's possible, don't leave the person with thoughts of suicide alone. Get them to refer to their safety plan. And again, as much as you can, stay calm, breathe. It's going to be okay. And just know that there's always someone, again, so important that you're not in this alone. There's always someone for you to turn to. But yeah, if you fear there is an immediate risk to life, 999, because this is a life or death emergency. And then we've kind of left what I always feel is one of the most important parts to last, which is self-compassion, what we would call self-care. But we prefer at Exercise self-compassion. So we would like you to imagine that you have an internal battery, and there's things that drain you and there's things that charge you up. I very rarely let my phone get to 20%. However, I will happily let myself get to 20% and not think anything of it. So it's learning that mindset, or like empty, car, fuel for your car. You won't drive around on empty thinking you're grand. If you've got a big journey coming up, you're going to refill your petrol, your diesel. We need to start having that same thoughts about ourselves, especially when we're having these kind of conversations, especially when we're supporting someone. Maybe we're living with someone who is actively having thoughts of suicide or attempting suicide. It seems so counterintuitive, because I know all the people watching this are like super kind humans, just want to give everything, but we can't give if we are running on empty. It's physically impossible. So I'd like you to think about your internal battery, think about what percentage you're at. What is it that drains your battery? Is it having those tough conversations with loved ones? Is it school? Is it scrolling on social media at 4 a.m? Is it the amount of chores you've got around the house? Is it work? And then think about what recharges the battery. It could be reading, walks in nature, seeing friends, maybe even just putting on a silly film or doing your favorite hobby. But having this in your mind at all times. So if you are picking up your child from school and you know there's a tough conversation ahead, go, what percentage am I at? So I'm at 25 because I've had a really tough day. Well, this conversation is definitely going to drain that. So before I pick my child up, can I go for a walk? Can I go sit in a coffee shop with a coffee? Can I do one, even just 10, 15 minutes a day of something? Even if it's literally sitting out in your garden and just watching insects like butterflies and stuff like that flying around. Anything like that, 10 minutes a day even makes such a big difference. So Declan, what drains your battery?
I think a lot of the time for me, it's just figuring out exactly kind of where I need to be and when, that kind of thing of like planning out what it is you have to do in a day or in a week, and then how you're going to squeeze all that in. Like that kind of overwhelming part of it can sometimes be very draining. And then it's like, it sounds like a silly thing, but for me specifically, if I'm really working in front of a computer screen for the day, it just like turns my brain to mush. So yeah, things like that. And then those are kind of the most common ones for me. And then I struggle with sleep. So some days I just, I'll go to bed and I'll get maybe like 45 minutes to an hour sleep, even though I've been in bed for like 8 or 9 hours. And then that's just the next day, you just feel like you're not really there. So those are probably the most common ones for me.
Thank you for sharing.
What's your kind of things that drain you out?
I would definitely say like having any kind of drama in my life really stresses me out, but that's just life. You're always going to have that. So if my daughter comes home from school and says about big bust up she's had with her friends, I get really drained from that. I think particularly because I know I can't rescue her. I find that really difficult. So that really drains my battery. Definitely for me would be having difficult conversations with my daughter. Chores, I hate chores so much. Housework does not fill up my battery. So yeah, lots of things.
Yep. General life admin stuff.
See, insurance, car insurance, house insurance, I'm at zero instantly.
Yeah, anything that involves having to be on hold on the phone is gonna like
totally.
Yeah. That's fair.
Completely that. So yeah, being aware of it again, like being aware of it is actually so good, because I can go into that knowing my car insurance renewal is coming up. I can go, right, I need to up the charge
Yeah.
instantly.
Yeah. No, this is going to suck. So like, let's get ahead of it and be ready.
Totally.
Yeah.
And what can I do after? Have I got a really difficult meeting straight after getting off the phone with the insurance company? Yes. Okay, well, that's getting cancelled. So that's really important. So what would charge up your battery?
I would say for me, it's like music, whether it's playing guitar or just like listening to stuff that I know recharges me. And then that can be in different ways. It could be music that makes me like feel energized, or it could be music that provides a sort of emotional release. I think those things are equally valid. I think there's sort of a misunderstanding that something that elicits a sort of not a negative response, but like a more vulnerable emotional response can't be a good thing. So I know this is something we talked about before, but it's like, if you have an incredibly tough conversation, if you sit down for 3 hours with someone who you love dearly and have this big conversation with them and discover that they're going through a tough time and they have thoughts of suicide, if afterwards you need to sit somewhere and have a big cry and think about that because you're feeling what they're feeling, that's fine, because you're going to feel better afterwards. And then conversely, if you want to go and like just listen to some music that's going to make you feel energized or pumped up, or watch a film that's going to make you laugh, or it's whatever it is that works for you. But yeah, for me, it's definitely like music. And then I have a couple of friends who I know I can talk to, and we can be talking about anything, whether it's life or death, really serious things or not, and they will have me like howling with laughter, because it's just like even in kind of like with like dark topics, that kind of black humor, there's like certain friends of mine who just can make anything funny, and it's like that's such a big release. And also I think it takes the power away from something, when you can laugh about something which is a serious topic. It stops it being, even just if it's in that moment, it stops it being so intense and so scary.
Totally it's amazing.
Yeah, so I'd say most of the time music, whether that's making me feel like I want to smash something, or whether it's making me feel kind of more emotional, either one's going to help me kind of recharge. And then having a laugh about stuff as well. But what about yourself?
I would say my big one is having walks in nature, or just being in nature in general. I never feel worse. And it's like sometimes it's the one thing I do not want to do. Like I do not want to get dressed, put my shoes on and go outside. It might be raining, it might be I hate the heat, so it might be too warm, but I've never come in from a walk in nature and felt worse.
Yeah.
So I know that that's like an instant charge, even though I talk myself out of doing it all the time. I'm like, I haven't got time to go for a walk, or I don't want to because it's raining. I will always feel better for it. So that's like my number one. And then it's just like sometimes just watching really rubbish telly. I think, like I'll just put on like Jane McDonald's Cruises and just sit, and I'm like, there's nothing wrong with the world. Do you know what I mean? Because she's just ray of sunshine. Or even like something that will make me totally go to a different place, like a Game of Thrones episode. I think we kind of sometimes we villainize watching telly or like scrolling through TikTok videos because too much is unhealthy. But watching I've got like a saved TikTok folder on my phone, which is just like really hilarious videos that no matter how many times I watch them, I will laugh.
Yeah.
And the more I watch them, the more I can't breathe because I'm laughing so much. So that kind of thing really does help. And I know it's kind of one of those things that people don't too much, like I said, too much of it. Watching a TikTok for 15 minutes versus watching it for 3 hours is a very different thing. So limited amount of screen time for me is great. But yeah, definitely walks in nature, watching some kind of comedy, and
almost those kind of guilty pleasures, right? Like
100%. Yeah.
You should probably like eat a salad and do some sit-ups, but also sometimes what you really need is just like 4 pounds of mac and cheese.
Yeah, completely.
It's like,
it's all about balance though. It's like that for that one occasion, why not do it? Exactly that. And like sometimes I'm sitting there going, I should be really watching a documentary on something really interesting and educational. I'm like, I just want to put on Married at First Sight. So it's that those little guilty pleasures are great. Walks in nature. I do love to read, I do love to paint, but I do find that sometimes it's finding the energy to do those things I find really difficult. But when I do them, I love it, and I think, oh my god, I need this all the time. But they're my two go-tos when I'm at like 4%. They're my quick wins. If I'm at a 25%, I'll do some reading, or I'll do like a painting or something like that. But I'm very aware that the setup of it drains me and the process of it drains me. So I need to be careful when I do those things.
I agree totally. I think a lot of those more like creative things, I have to already be I have to be in like a good headspace in order to do them.
100%, right? Yeah.
Even if I'm then channeling something which is kind of the opposite of that, if I'm writing a song which is about, it's not like sunshine and whatever else, but I have to be in like a good headspace to do it. I'm specifically, for me, I'm like that with skateboarding.
Yeah.
I love skating. I can't go skating if I'm having like a rough day. The last thing I want to do is spend 3 hours falling over and being hit in the shins with a piece of wood. It just it has
exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, it has no appeal to me. Whereas
totally.
When I'm in a good mood, I'm more than happy to go out and just get bodied for 4 hours. Like it just rolls off me at that point. So
yeah, that's precisely the point. Like I love being artistic and painting, but I know that if I'm already feeling really stressed and in a bit of a crap mood and something goes wrong, it's gonna make me even worse. So
yes, that's
exactly. It's a great one for when you're a bit higher up in that percentage.
Yeah, I think it's good for processing stuff kind of post event,
Yeah, completely. Oh, and another thing I do, which is a really great one, is journaling. I do that no matter what I am, and that's just literally writing out all of my thoughts, no matter, and saying the things I don't want to say out loud.
Yep.
In my journal. I love it so much. I think that's a really good, another quick win. And again, like you said, straight afterwards, just writing out what happened, how I was feeling. That's a really quick win. So yeah, kind of like we're talking about breaking them up into sections of going, what's my quick wins and what's my ones for when I'm a little bit higher up on that percentage point.
Yeah, it's a good way of looking at it. Yeah.
So then what we're going to ask you to do, and this is something that we try to do at Hector's House on our regular meetings, is doing a check-in on a scale from 1 to 10. How am I feeling today? So 1 being really crap, 10 being really great. I think I'm sitting at like a 6 at the moment, because I've just said to Declan before we jumped on here, I've had no sleep. I've just come back from a holiday. I'm feeling really exhausted. So I'm at a 6 because life's pretty good. But I know what's going to get me to an 8 or a 9 is rest. My crap TV tonight. I'm not going to be doing any painting. I'm going to go for a walk in a bit, and that's going to really bump me up too. So recognizing every day, you can do this a number of times a day. Check in. Where am I today? What can I do to increase it? Declan, where are you on the scale?
Probably like a 7.5. I think something I always say in like when we have meetings and stuff is if I'm a 9 or a 10, I'm pretty much insufferable, because that's when I'm like absolutely manic. And that's when like I lose all kind of sense of volume control, and I'm very like, everything's very full on, which for me is like, that's if I'm skating and like having a laugh with friends. That's if I'm playing a show. If I'm on stage, I'm like a 9 or a 10, because you got to fill that space. But I can't be that all the time. Number 1, I'd be exhausting, and 2, I'd take everyone absolutely round the bend, because it's like, it's too much. So like an 8 is kind of a good place for me to be like idling along. So is a 7, to be fair. Either of those I feel like pretty good. So I'd say I'm kind of in the middle, maybe a 7.5 as opposed to an 8, because of having to think about everything I'm saying while we're doing this, and trying to make sure I'm trying to make sure I'm wording things as articulately as possible, not wasting too much time with ums and ers. And also, as we discussed before starting this, trying not to swear, which I find really difficult. So because I'm so used to working either on my own or in a team of people where it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I've pretty much lost all filter. So this is quite taxing to be like, what am I saying? How am I going to say that without like throwing those words in? So yeah, I think that's just keeping me kind of in between the two. But yeah, generally I'm in a pretty good spot today.
That's pretty good. And you're doing very well not swearing so far.
Thank you.
So yeah, we can do this as many times a day as we need to. Like, it's good to do it first thing in the morning. Maybe, around kind of lunchtime-ish, because, the day has kind of happened to us a little bit. And then just before we're starting to wind down in the evening, it's good to check in, because we don't really want to be going to bed on a 1 or a 2, because we're probably not going to sleep. So before bed, what can we do to ramp that number up? And we'll give you a few little pointers, but like I say, these vary for everyone. Like, what puts me up to an 8 or a 9 is going to is going to drop someone else down because they can think of nothing worse than doing yoga or whatever it is. So some simple things to focus on would be the 3 eat, move, love. That's our 3 kind of main aims for topping up that number, getting ourselves to a higher number. Eat would be eating more whole foods, so single ingredient foods. We're not going to ask you to clear out all the food in your cupboard and replace it with whole grains and whatever. Like, just, can you eat an apple, or can you drink some water? Can you try and keep that 80-20 balance in your head of, if I eat 80% of like nourishing foods, I've got 20% of unnourishing foods that bring me comfort.
And there's a lot of it as well. It's kind of changing things like for like, you know, rather than buying like a jar of pasta sauce or like a tin of soup, can you just make your own?
Yeah,
you're
totally.
getting rid of so much of that tap like right out the gate, and you're still eating the same stuff. You're just getting rid of all the bits that really aren't doing you any favors.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, it's building up to that, isn't it? So
yeah.
Today you might be like, yeah, actually, do you know what? I really fancy making my own soup. That sounds delicious, and I've got the energy to do it. But if we're at a 1 or a 2, even just reaching for that pile of grapes versus the packet of crisps can feel like a massive chore. Yeah. So it's just about being aware of, if I eat the grapes, I'm going to feel a bit better. If I eat the crisps, I'm probably going to plateau. If you eat both, you might, you know, have a bit more of an up. So just try and keep that in mind. So just, yeah, eat more whole single ingredient food. Fruit. I'm obsessed with fruit. I swear to God, I just think everyone should eat more of that because it's just so sweet and tasty. So find your favorite fruit. If it's mango, if it's strawberry, like almost make it like a treat, you know. So go out and enjoy that. And then move would be moving your body just a little bit. It doesn't have to be signing up for a 10K. It doesn't have to be lifting weights at the gym. It can literally just be, like I said, go out and have a walk in nature. It could be walking up and down the stairs a little bit. It could be having a stretch. Like, there's nothing better than being at a desk and just like having a really good stretch of your arms and your neck and your back. Like, even that in itself is going to increase your number up.
It's the first thing I'm going to do when we get done with this. I can feel my back where I've been sat for like an hour or so, and I can't wait to stand up and just like a big like character style stretch. Yeah,
I don't do it. I'm really guilty for not remembering to stretch, and I'll be like, at the end of the day, and my shoulders will be up to my ears, and it's just because I've been sitting like this all day. So it's like I have to be really mindful to remember to stretch it out. And we're so lucky nowadays that there's so many good YouTube tutorials or videos on, you know, Pilates or yoga or a quick strength workout. If again we're feeling up for that, you know what I mean? If we're feeling like that's going to be achievable today, that's great. If literally getting out of bed and stretching is what the only thing that you can muster today, fantastic, we're proud of you, that's amazing. And then the next day you might be able to do a bit more. And then love is loving yourself and other people. So this would be trying to connect with someone, reaching out and saying hi to a friend or arranging a coffee. It could be like we said, that kind of stuff. Like journaling is always really good. Maybe doing a meditation, maybe trying to be aware of how you're talking to yourself today. Am I just berating myself constantly? Am I just telling myself I'm useless? Well, can we just stop that and just maybe even say I'm doing all right considering everything that I'm going through? That little change is huge, and that's going to help top up that number. But again, this is going to be very personal to what you like and who you are. So do something that you love and connect with someone that you love.
And I think it's probably the hardest thing is like, just accept it. People do love you. Like, people do care about you.
Yeah.
Like, people really value you. And it's like, it's so hard sometimes to let that into like to your own head. But yeah, people love you. People care about you. People want you around. People want what's best for you. And it can be very difficult to accept that. And remember that people view you differently to how you view yourself. You know, there is a version of you that lives in everyone's head, and it's like they love who you are and what you mean to them, and that's very difficult to get your head around, especially if you're not having a good day. But yeah, people really do. People love you and people want you to be here.
Completely. Even when we can't see it, it's so true. So yeah, and at the heart of this is actually suicide prevention. So if you're supporting someone who is having thoughts of suicide, getting them to do a little eat, move, love, and a check-in, although we're focusing on the person who's helping the person with thoughts of suicide to stay well, this can be for everybody, these simple tasks. And again, it's going to look very different. So for a person who's well, eat, move, love might look like, like you said, making a homemade soup, doing a Pilates exercise on YouTube, and booking a holiday with our friends, or booking a day out with our friends. For a person with thoughts of suicide, it might look like actually eating something, even if it's not a nourishing food. It might just be eating something.
Just anything.
It might be anything, exactly. It might be getting off the sofa and having a stretch and sitting straight back down again. It might be calling a helpline, texting a friend, or being so proud of yourself going to bed that you've made it through another day. Like it's a scale, and it's where you're at. And this is why that 1 to 10 check-in is so important, because if we're at a 1, the last thing we should be doing is trying to overexert ourselves. So yeah, it's a really great tool, and it's so simple. Eat, move, love. Just if we can do one of those things every day, you're golden. And then just some really important reminders before we finish up today. It's so important to remember that you're not responsible for the well-being of someone else entirely. They will still have autonomy over their body, over their life. You can help them get to the stage of, it's a bit like how I always see it with for a first aider. If you witness an accident and you help them, you then put them in the ambulance and they go off. You've got no control over what happens to that person afterwards, even though you want them to be okay. It's out of our control entirely. It's the same here. That person will still have control of what happens to them. You're not to blame for any decisions that they make. You have done such a fantastic job in helping them here. You could have easily turned away, but you didn't. So it's just really important to remember that you're not responsible. It's also really important to remember that you're not alone in this, and you can't do it alone. It's not going to be feasible, because you're going to burn out pretty quickly. So please reach out. Please reach out to the helplines we've talked about. Go onto the Hector's House website, which will be on the end of this video, and find a helpline that suits the needs that you have at the moment. So if you're dealing with someone who's maybe a young person, there's Young Minds, there's Papyrus. If you're struggling yourself, there's Hector's House. There's so many places on the website that you can turn to. But Hector's House is always open. And like I say, Samaritans and 85258 for that 24-hour care is always there. This will end. This is temporary. It's not going to be forever. I know it feels like it might even be that you've been helping this person for 6-7 months and it feels like it's just never going to end. It will. It's temporary. Everything's going to be okay eventually, but we just need to stay patient and just remember that it will pass. And just remember that there's always hope to be found, even in the most dire situations that we see. There is always hope. So even the fact the person has reached out to you, or the fact that they said, I've called a helpline, or they were hospitalized, that's still hopeful. I know it doesn't seem it seems very basic, but that still is hope. So just try to keep that in your mind, that there is always hope out there. And that's it. Anything else from you, Jack, that I have missed out?
I think it's just to basically sign it off and say thanks for watching, and just remind everyone who we are, basically. So yeah, Hector's House, which you can find websites there. You can find us on social media and things as well. And that email address at the bottom, hihector@hectorshouse.org.uk. That is the best one to use to get in touch with us with anything, whether it's anything that we've talked about in this video or anything else. If it's a case of you want to learn more about what we do, or you want to volunteer, or you're worried about yourself or someone else, whatever it is, that's the best way to get in touch with us, because that will go to a general inbox where we can then get it to the right person. And yeah, like we said before, if there's any kind of emergency when you're dealing with someone, don't be afraid to call 999. That's if it's a life or death situation, that's what that's for. Don't be afraid to be blunt. when you're asking someone if they are dealing with thoughts of suicide. I think that's really important, just to punctuate that and reiterate that. And again, in an emergency situation, whether it's for yourself or someone else, you can text Hector to 85258, and that's a 24/7 text line response. Someone will pick that up. And we have a big thing we talk about how we take people where we find them. So whatever it is that's happening, they will deal with you from where you're at then and there. So that's everything I think to kind of sign off with.
Cool. I mean, that was perfect in itself, I think.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, thank you, Sarah, so much for your time. You put all these slides together and you did, 90% of the legwork on this. So thank you so much for your time. And yeah, to anyone who's watched this, thank you so much. If you need us, now you know where we are, and hopefully you've got the things that you need to do your best. And ultimately, that's all you can do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Declan, for your time as well. I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for you. So thank you for being here and being so amazing. And yes, hopefully, one thing to sign off with actually is this video sometimes isn't the easiest thing to watch. I think Declan and I do this day in, day out. We forget about the impact that it might have. So we would strongly urge you to do something that tops up that battery straight away after turning this off. So go make yourself a cup of tea and sit in the garden, go for a walk, call a friend, do a jigsaw, whatever it is that brings you joy. So, and look after yourselves and know that we're here.
That's the last thing I was going to say as well, was just take care of
great.
And take care of yourselves, take care of each other. All we have is each other. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Goodbye.